Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome into another edition of Sox On Tap. It's Tony Marchese alongside NWI Steve, who's still waiting for Ishbia to save us, and maybe he did. We'll get to that in a little bit. But before we do, Steven, how's your weekend going, my friend?
Hey, Antonio. Weekend, was salvaged because of the fact that the Sox did the unthinkable, stopped an 8-game losing streak and won a series. So I'm going to pat myself on the back here because my column that I wrote on Friday, obviously Will Venable read it. He distributed it in the clubhouse to the guys. They came out and they played an inspired brand of baseball over the course of this weekend that was a lot more palatable than what we saw during that 8-game losing streak.
It was palatable White Sox baseball, Stephen. I do agree with that assessment. I know you're liking to give yourself a lot of credit for this one. Why don't you go into a little bit of what you were laying down for the boys, so to speak, in that article, if our listeners haven't read it?
Well, essentially, I just kind of took a look back at the course of the last two seasons, and we all know how disastrous they were. 2023 going 61-101 in Pedro Grifol's first season. And then, we don't need to talk about what happened last year anymore. But in each of those, in each of the last three seasons, this team has had a losing streak of at least 7 games during the month of April. They had a 10-game losing streak that essentially sunk the season in 2023 when Pedro Grifol was a rookie manager, and he kind of showed right then and there that he didn't have the wherewithal to do the right things to dig this team out of a prolonged stretch of bad play. And then you go back to last season, they had a 7-game losing streak that was the culmination of a 3-22 start. So basically, at the end of the day, look, we know this team has a great talent deficit. There's not a whole lot Will Venable can ultimately do to impact things on a day in and day out basis. There have been some decisions, some bunting and some other things that I have disagreed with here early on, and I'm going to call those things out, and I'm going to continue to do so. But basically, I just kind of said, look, you need to act with a sense of urgency. You need to find a way to put a stop to this thing right now and not let this snowball. Because while, yes, there are a lot of new faces with this team this year, if this thing gets out of hand and you get to a 10-game losing streak or a 12-game or a 14-game losing streak, then all of a sudden now all the media questions before the game, even for guys that weren't here, it's going to be, oh, this feels an awful lot like last year, when you guys had, multiple double-digit game losing streaks here. How are you coping with the pressure of not having to, deal with that again here in 2025? So, it was just nice to see the team actually kind of go out there on Friday night. Davis Martin threw the ball really well, was getting ahead of hitters, was actually getting some swings and misses. And there was just some good quality, timely hitting there. They had some nice at-bats, and it was just a good, clean, fun win. And it was also especially nice to see this team take 2 out of 3 this weekend after the clip that was kind of making the rounds of the Ginger Sox play-by-play announcers saying about the trip to Chicago coming at the right time for them. How'd that work out?
It's a good question. I'm glad we won this series for that reason. Just baseball images or baseball visions, whatever it is, that precede unfortunate events there, Stephen, for the Boston Red Sox booth. It was a good weekend in White Sox baseball. I was there today. Obviously, they didn't bring home a W to talk about here, but I think your article sort of sets the tone for this show, Stephen, very well.
He said the thing.
Yeah, sets the tone for this show because it was starting to feel a lot like last year to me. And your points about, it being a thing that's going to get tossed around in the media and man, heading into this series, we were already starting to see some of those White Sox in the national media for the wrong reasons type storylines pop up. You had Lance Lynn on Foul Territory this week talking about how Chicago is leaps and bounds behind everyone else. There were a couple other weird random news stories out there that just don't paint the Sox in some good light. And you come out there after the Boston announcers say it's the right time to go to Chicago, and you get handedly beat on Friday night. The offense actually shows up in that ball game. That was a good night to be a White Sox fan. And yesterday, they got themselves another victory. First 2-game winning streak. I'm not going to call it really a streak here, Steven, but first back-to-back wins of the season for the Chicago White Sox. Today was a little bit of a struggle, but overall it was a well-played series on the heels of what was a very bad stretch of baseball. And I think that you and I had talked about this with our guy Bez just probably sometime in the middle of last week, how much the vibes changed from the opening series to where we were in, our first extended losing streak of the season.
And while it doesn't negate some of the obvious issues that are still prevalent with this team, the offense is still a mess. There's just not a lot of firepower there. That's something that is going to continue, unfortunately. But like you said, to actually see them go out there and slap the Red Sox in the face with it on Friday night, that was really nice to see, especially again after the comments that Dave O'Brien and Will Middlebrooks made in the booth. That game on Thursday when they were playing Toronto at home, and then to get a come from behind victory on Saturday, a late inning come from behind victory, something that this team, it literally took them until their last homestand of 2024 to be able to pull that off. So to get that out of the way here now, that was a really nice thing to see. And, I was kind of joking back and forth about this in the text thread, the fact that they got win number 4 this year in game 14. They didn't do that until game 26 a year ago. So there is some incremental improvement there, but like I said, there are still issues there that need to be addressed. And ultimately,
I was going to ask you, is that something that we should be celebrating? They're ahead of pace right now.
Unfortunately, we do kind of have to look at this. Because we don't want to be in a position of being the first team to ever have back-to-back 120 loss seasons, correct?
I'm not one that wants to, be in that camp. However, it just feels sort of hollow to me, man, to sit here and, think about how much farther ahead of, the win total pace that we are sitting in this position right now. It feels kind of bad, if you ask me.
It's obviously not ideal, but again, this is just where we're at.
Guess so. Sorry, I'll let you keep going there. I just had to ask this question because it was burning a hole in my pocket.
No, that's all right. But like I said, I think we saw them win 2 games a couple of different ways over the weekend. You get the blowout win on Friday, which you get an offensive explosion in there. You score double-digit runs, and you get a 10-run victory, which at that point it was like all of their 3 wins that they had, including that one, they were all in blowout fashion. So to see that, was nice. And then to follow it up on the next day on Saturday with a come from behind victory, and for the team to actually hit their first home run in, 8 games was, encouraging to see as well. The lack of power is still very problematic. And that is something that, like I said earlier, is going to persist just given the issues with this lineup right now and the lack of quality up and down.
I know that you're a big ball go far, team go far guy. Friday, you were happy with the offense there. You talk about this offense still being a problem, and I agree with you. But they've now done this 2 or 3 times where they've come out and they've put up over 7, 8 runs. So it's there. The ability for them to do this is there. I think it's just at least from my perspective, there's not enough talent to sustain that through a series. It's very sparse when you do see an offensive outburst from the Chicago White Sox. Is this a thing that's going to get worse throughout the season, Steven, or can you see them start to actually string some stuff together? Big call up, Chase Mydroth, guy that can get on base. You think, throughout the season we're going to see this get progressively worse through subtractions of guys like Luis Robert? Not that he's done anything to write home about so far this season, but I get intrigued with this offense when they show up like Friday, and then it goes silent. I know today is not really a great example. Garrett Crochet pitched his ass off against his former team. Good pitcher, by the way, Steve. It'd be really help the White Sox if they had someone like that.
Big if true.
But I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Do you think it's going to get worse throughout the season, or do you think we're going to see some young guys come up and sort of solve these problems? I don't know which way this is going to go.
I mean, I would venture to say that we will see call-ups during the course of the season here. Edgar Caro is still swinging the bat pretty well down in Charlotte. Kyle Teal has cooled off since winning International League Player of the Week to start the season, and we don't even need to discuss what's going on with the shortstop down in Charlotte right now. So, theoretically, I feel like Edgar Caro is going to be the next guy.
You don't want to talk about the second coming of Corey Seager?
No, I don't want to talk about the shortstop down in Charlotte anymore. I don't want to talk about him. But Edgar Caro's continuing to swing the bat down there. Tim Elko, another guy that is swinging the bat well down in Charlotte, and given the issues that this team is having at the first base position, if this is something that continues for the next 3 to 4 weeks, the voices are going to get a lot louder wanting to see Tim Elko come up. Now, look, this is a guy that's, if he's not 26 already, he's going to be 26 in relatively short order. And so for somebody at that age to, still be in the minor leagues, it doesn't, lead to a great deal of optimism that he's going to be a significant player or a significant part of this team here. But I've said it a lot last season and over the course of this winter, I don't need to see any more of Andrew Vaughn. So if they decided they wanted to pivot and bring up Tim Elko for a little bit and give him a little bit of run and see if maybe he can run into a few balls, fine. Or the other thing too is, look, if Edgar Caro continues to hit the ball, hey, you can rotate him between catcher, first base, and DH. And he's the one that I would expect to see first. But like I said, I would also expect Kyle Teal at some point here this season. Those are the two right now that just jump off the bat to me.
Yeah, Tim Elko's an interesting name. It feels like a guy that they're eventually going to have to give a little bit of a cup of tea to, just to see what's there. But you're spot on with the age assessment there, and whether or not he's going to be anything of significance for the Chicago White Sox future. I'm not going to hold my breath on this one, Steve, but I just want to see this offense maybe even it out. I know there's the good old baseball cliche, save some runs for tomorrow. It really feels like a problem with this team so far in the early going of the season.
Well, that's going to be an issue when you're a team that really doesn't have a great offensive approach, doesn't draw walks with consistency. We'll see little, bits and pieces of it. This team's done some really weird things where the first time through the order in several of these games, they'll show a modicum of patience and they'll take pitches and draw some walks. And it's like after they see the pitcher that first time through, they're like, okay, let's go back to just, swinging with great regularity and everything. So when you are very reliant on, having to actually get hits to have runners on base when you don't consistently work counts and draw free passes, offenses are going to go dormant for extended periods of time. And we've seen this for the better part of, the last 10 to 12 years, unfortunately, minus, a short little window there in 2020 and 2021. but this has been synonymous with this team for much of the last decade, unfortunately, and it's not really going to change right now with this cast of characters that they have right now. Maybe when Noodle Boy gets back, you'll have some semblance of a professional hitter, another one in there.
I think that's the first positive thing you've said about Andrew Benintendi on these airwaves.
I mean, whatever.
Unbelievable.
Maybe Josh Rojas when the toe situation gets figured out and he sees a little bit of playing time, maybe it's short in place of Jacob Amaya.
You could see Brandon Drury up here as well.
Yeah, they brought him back. So, but again, those aren't really guys that are going to move the needle significantly. So,
you're expecting this offensive streakiness to continue with large dry spells.
Absolutely.
That's what I kind of figured as well. Steve, Friday's ball game, awesome. Saturday, get out of there with the win. We'll talk a little bit about today's baseball game. Garrett Crochet makes his return to Chicago and was absolutely lights out. I think
Anthony, before we talk about Garrett Crochet today, can we talk about the absurdity of them giving him a standing ovation? What was it, Friday night?
See, I didn't catch the standing O. I heard about this. I think it is a little absurd, although he was a member of a playoff White Sox team. What did he really accomplish here?
Okay, so you were on a playoff team,
they booed Yohan Moncada, and then you're standing over. What I don't understand
for a guy that was a reliever on that team.
I don't understand it. I understand why people liked him last season.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, it seemed like, and the quotes in the media too. Let's talk about the quotes with Scott Merkin.
Have at it.
Garrett Crochet didn't seem like he wanted anything good for Chicago or the Chicago White Sox. Seems to have a bad taste in his mouth, at least from what I'm inferring from the quotes that came out from Merkin on Friday. A guy that was not really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's very clear that there is some ill will there, and the whole situation at the trade deadline a year ago with the agent basically saying that if you're going to trade us, then you have to make sure that the acquiring team gives us an extension. Otherwise, which it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
He got his extension anyway.
He did, but
he was going to.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously very bitter about that situation, which whatever. But I mean,
Chris Getz kind of seems bitter about that situation too, though.
Yeah, there's some obvious heat between the two of them right there. It's very clear.
That's not that. Hate to bring this up. That doesn't seem like the first White Sox left-handed power pitcher that had a beef with the organization over something.
Yeah, but I think this is different because Chris Sale told them that the jerseys were not comfortable to pitch in. He told them that, and then they fucked with the rotation coming out of the All-Star break, giving him, they put him on extended rest when they didn't have to fucking do that. They could have lined it up so he didn't have to pitch in that game, and then that whole incident doesn't happen. But he fucking told them in spring training that those jerseys were not comfortable to pitch in. So I will side with Chris Sale on that.
I knew you would. But I had to bring it up. That he's not the first left-handed pitcher to have issues with the Chicago White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at this, I don't understand where he gets a standing ovation.
Again, okay, he had one good season as a starter. The rest of the time, he was a reliever. He missed a season with Tommy John. This is what we're applauding now. We're really lowering the fucking bar here. I mean, my God,
is he going to get White Sox legend status?
I mean, honestly, what's next? And if Brian Goodwin is able to catch on with the team again, is he going to get a standing ovation because he hit that walk-off home run against Cleveland and then said to somebody on the fucking interwebs, kick rocks ho? Is he going to get a standing O for that? Because that kind of feels like where we're going at this point.
Well, Billy Hamilton would probably get a standing ovation if he ever made a return into Chicago.
Good Lord.
This is sports now, Steve.
Yeah, and this is getting fucking ridiculous. Actually, no, it's not getting. We're there already.
We are there, but I think it has more to do with the fact that White Sox fans last season really had one thing to root for, and it was Garrett Crochet.
Okay,
I think there's a little recency bias with this.
Yeah, but that doesn't make the entire body of work.
Oh, I'm not saying it makes it worthy. I'm not saying it makes it worthy. I'm saying that I think that there's a recency bias Friday night crowd at a White Sox game, and they know who Garrett Crochet is, and they know he's good.
Okay, but why is the organization doing that? Have some fucking standards.
Oh, see that.
That's
egged on with the thank you Garrett Crochet video board thing.
Yeah.
I understood Jose. I understood Jose Abreu. I don't think we need to be doing it for Garrett Crochet.
That's my whole point there. Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
It's completely unworthy.
There's no reason to do that in my opinion. Big names, sure, but I don't think Garrett Crochet really made himself into a big name on the south side of Chicago. Sure, he was a name. He had a great year last year. Was your opening day pitcher, all that stuff, but you gotta have a larger body of work, in my opinion, than one season as a starter and some relief appearances. Fair?
100%.
The Brian Goodwin video is gonna hit like crack. God. Oh man. So Crochet comes out today, and I think he shoved. I think he shoved pretty damn well. Carries a no-hitter through what, 6, Steven? And
no, it was through 7.
Through 7 innings, and Sox finally break it up. And it was the guy that we acquired in the Garrett Crochet deal, Chase Maydroth. And Steven, I want your thoughts on what you've seen from the young rookie, who's giving me some like Gordon Beckham type vibes early on here. Let me know what you see from Mr. Maydroth.
To this point, he's kind of lived up to his billing as a guy that has a good control of the strike zone, is not going to swing at pitches out of the zone. He's going to work counts pretty regularly. We saw that in his debut on Friday, drawing 3 walks and getting that gift base hits. I mean, let's be real, that was a very generous scoring right there. And then he followed that up with a single in his first at bat, becoming the first player in the history of the franchise to reach base in his first 5 plate appearances after being called up. So
I think that's pretty cool and tough.
Absolutely. And look, this is a guy that, if you look at prospect lists, he's not very heralded. He's going to be a top 10 guy within the Sox system here, but nobody's looking at him as a top 100 prospect, or nobody's looking at him as a game changer. But he's showing some versatility. Played shortstop yesterday. Playing second base. The other 2 games, they've talked about the fact that he can play third, so he can play multiple different positions across the infield, showing a quality plate approach. And those are some good traits and some good tools to have right there. So he's come up, he's acquitted himself nicely. He has not looked as if the moment is too big for him. He seemed comfortable at the plate. Today, going first to third in that 8th inning off the single by Brooks Baldwin, I think it was a kind of aggressive decision on the bases there. And it looked like after he scored the run, like he was getting talked to in the dugout about it. I don't know how many people really caught that, but it kind of seemed like maybe I can't remember which one of the coaches it was, but it seemed like they were in his ear a little bit, telling him, hey, should you really have tried to stretch it in that situation when you're down 2 runs in the 8th inning there? It worked out fine, but something to kind of keep an eye on there. he's handled both of those middle infield positions fine to this point. So, hey, let's just
There was a ball. There was a ball today that he sort of misjudged at second base, and they moved him over to short late in the game. But there was a ball that I think he kind of just got a bad read off of the bat. Kind of headed a little bit towards up the middle, and the ball winds up going a little bit more towards right field there. There were some angry people in the stands. I didn't think that it was ultra egregious, Steve. I think that your assessment is spot on. I was just really intrigued by the fact that people were kind of dogging him for that one misread in the field today. And, I think he's going to take his chances. He's going to make his mistakes too. He's only been up here for less than a week. So I'm sure there's a little bit of nerves, even though, as you said, it looks like the moment isn't too big for him. My first impression is he's got, some really solid fundamental baseball skills. They don't jump off the page at you. He's not the type of guy that's going to be, a household baseball name, but he definitely seems like someone that is the opposite of what we witnessed with a lot of guys in the last rebuild that came up here.
So you're saying that the history of second baseman acquired for a left-handed starting pitcher from the Boston Red Sox that ultimately wore number 10 at the corner of 35th and Shields, you're saying that he might not fit that mold, maybe?
I don't think he fits that mold, just from the eye test so far, Steve. It's interesting because I think that, it's weird that we've got this sort of simulation-esque thing going on here with number 10.
Skynet.
It's becoming self-aware. I don't think he's going to fit into that mold. I think he's a completely different type of ball player, one that I think will, if he sticks, be a lot more appreciated around here. That's just my guess, long-term guess. I think he's the type of guy that's going to play a style of baseball that people in Chicago are going to appreciate. Is he going to help, change the game? I hate to use that term. I don't think so, but I think he's got some solid fundamental skills. Isn't going to rock too many boats and play baseball and focus on baseball things rather than some off the field stuff. That's my assessment.
He might have a little grinder in him.
Yeah. A little bit. It's a feeling that I get.
We'll continue to monitor the situation though.
Yeah, we'll definitely continue to monitor that one, but the first little Chase My Drop experience has been I don't know, man. He seems like he's something out of like White Sox past. Like that guy could wind up being a White Sox legend.
Well, our buddy Ozzy in the postgame show on Friday got a little hyperbolic with a comp, and he said, "Oh, maybe he could be a Dustin Pedroia type." And we're just between Brooks Baldwin being Ben Zobrist 2.0 and now Chase Mydroth maybe being Dustin Pedroia, I think we're just getting a little bit excessive and over the top with some of these comps right now. I think we need to just rein them in a little bit.
So if you had to comp Chase Mydroth so far,
I just hate doing comps. Like
I know you hate doing comps, but like give me a comp. I think it'd be fun. And I'm just curious as to who you would comp him to.
I mean, a second baseman that draws walks and doesn't have a ton of power.
Is he what Nick Madrigal was supposed to be?
Fair. Yeah, I'd say that's probably fair. And I mean, he's only a couple inches taller than the Keebler elf. I mean, he looks somewhat diminutive up there in the batter's box. I haven't checked the official website to see what his listed height is at, but as it's been documented, Andrew Vaughn is listed as 6 foot on the website. So there might be some exaggeration going on there, but Yeah, maybe that's what he could be, and just don't be an idiot out there on the baseball field and actually have some baseball instincts, hopefully.
It helps. It helps. I hope he's a little bit more than that. Obviously, I think we all do. Uh, but so far, not a bad showing in his first stint in the major leagues. Steven, Garrett Crochet today was phenomenal. And I know that we've sort of danced around this one a little bit. Did you think the White Sox were going to be able to break this one up? At a certain point, I feel like a lot of White Sox fans thought that this was going to be a historic day on the south side of Chicago.
Well, when you, me, and Bez were texting each other, I kept trying to just, put it out there into the universe about the fact that he had a no-hitter. And I had a couple of other friends texting me during the course of the game, asking me if I was watching. I said, yes, I'm watching this no-hitter right now. So, again, I did my part. I did my part.
Good. Yeah, we were making it known in the ballpark as well today that there was a no-hitter taking place, and that Garrett Crochet was on the precipice of some things. It's kind of funny. I got the alert from MLB as it was getting broken up. Just perfect timing right there. I think the baseball gods were kind of working overtime to help us out in that one. Almost climbed back in this game. Obviously, we talked about the play where my drop extended that, made its way over to third base on the Baldwin single. Sox offense was unable to get the job done though in the bottom of the eighth to drive in those runs. It was really the only chance they had all game to make something work. Going to the ninth, they do get the tying run up to the plate after Boston added on an insurance run via your favorite method, the long ball. But comes up short here, Steven. I don't like our lineup at all in any of these late game situations because it just feels like there's a lack of firepower. It goes back to what we talked about just a little bit ago with this offense. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of those types of ball games going down through the rest of this season, Steven, where you just have absolutely nothing doing against a very formidable pitcher. And then, if and when you get to the bullpen, you got to be able to capitalize and play perfect baseball. It feels like this team has to play perfect baseball when they get their opportunities. And that's just not a margin for error that you can win on time and time again. I don't really have much more to say about this game than that. They were just not perfect today, and it results in a loss. And that's, I think, largely due to what we can classify here as a talent deficit.
Yeah, on the offensive side of it, I mean, that certainly was the situation there. The one
I do have to say, we got to tip our cap to Shane Smith, though.
And I've got some thoughts on him that I'll share here momentarily. But the last thing that I'll say about the offense, kind of put a bow on it, they didn't roll over and die. And this is something that we've talked about, I think, several times here through the first 2 weeks of this season, is that there does seem to be a different mindset with this team relative to the last 2 years, where when things would go wrong at that first sign of adversity, they would just kind of roll over and die out there. We're not seeing that to this point. They were in a position to tie or go ahead in this ballgame in the 8th inning. And, they could have had a second come from behind late inning victory here today. It didn't happen because, again, they don't have the firepower to be able to get that big hit when you need it in that situation. But again, just the fact that they put themselves in a position to do that when we didn't really see that very much last year, I think is an encouraging sign from the offensive standpoint there. As it relates to Shane Smith, went out there again today, 6 innings of 2-run ball, equated himself very nicely once again. Kind of saw him from an approach standpoint attack the Boston lineup a little bit differently than what we saw his first 2 outings. The changeup wasn't really utilized as heavily today as it had been in his first 2 starts. He was much more reliant on the curveball and the slider. in this particular outing, and he'd even talked about it after the game, saying that he didn't feel like he had a really good feel for the curveball. And that was something I noticed relatively early on here, is that he wasn't emphasizing the use of the changeup as much as he did during those first two outings. And it's kind of got me thinking a little bit, because really one of the first true tests for Shane Smith here at the major league level is going to come this coming Saturday, when he's going to have to see this Red Sox lineup again. So he's going to have to see him twice in the span of less than a week. That's a very difficult thing for veteran pitchers to do, seeing a quality lineup multiple times in a week, let alone somebody that's only started 3 games at the major league level here. So that's going to be a true test for him. So it almost kind of had me wondering a little bit, okay, were they trying to stay away from the changeup as heavily in this start, knowing that he's going to have to come back and see these guys again in 6 days, and maybe try to plant a seed of doubt in their mind, making them have to think about that slider and the curveball, even though he didn't have that good feel for the curveball, just making them know that that's there as an option and it's another weapon that he might have.
It's an interesting thought. I didn't think of that going into this. I did realize that the changeup didn't seem to be really the option that it has been in the first couple of starts for Smith today. I thought he pitched excellent, though. This game could have wound up totally different. We could be talking about a series sweep if it wasn't for a little bit of swirling winds that were at the ballpark today.
So I wanted to ask you about that. So obviously that play involving Brooks Baldwin that let the 2 runs score. From my perspective, watching it on my couch, I was thinking about this as like, okay, if there was an actual true outfielder in right field in that spot, I feel like that ball gets caught. Is that kind of what the prevailing thought was at the ballpark?
I kind of thought that at first, just the way that ball was hit. Although I will say, on a normal day in different wind, I think that ball leaves the yard. Unfortunately, the wind was coming just straight in from right, the way that everything was blowing today. And then you also sort of had a crosswind that was kind of knocking things down and left as well, sort of pushing it back towards the foul pole, towards left. But if you were looking at the flags, and we were looking at them right after that, there was sort of a bit of a swirl that was coming in, and it just sort of killed everything right there at the wall. I think Baldwin probably lost it because it sort of looked like he caught it over his shoulder at the last minute. Noticed that it sort of ducked a little bit more towards the foul line, and I think he just sort of lost sight of it. And there was a couple of pop-ups throughout the game on the infield. There was one that was caught there, I believe, in the last inning. I think it was Luis Robert. Anything that was hit towards the right side of the field, if it caught the gust or got high enough, man, it was getting picked, and it was moving at least 5 to 10 feet. So,
and I'm not trying to say that,
I think that someone who's patrolled right field, like someone who's an actual right fielder who plays right field at our stadium all the time, probably makes that catch. But I think it's sort of a toss-up, man. I don't know. I felt bad for Brooks on that play.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to shit on Brooks Baldwin for that. I mean, look, he's been thrust into playing corner outfield spots this year when he's never done it before.
Here's my question: are we going to have that same energy that we had for Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn that we're going to have for Brooks Baldwin here? Like, or is it a completely different set of circumstances now? That you've got a guy who should be playing in the infield, out in the outfield, yet I think we're probably down like 57 outfielders right now because all of them reside on the injured list. So it's a necessity. But you still had Palacios comes in the game later. There's a weird log jam in the middle of the field since you bring up Chase Mydroth into this infield mix, and you got Lenny Sosa sort of taking up some space, Miguel Vargas. Everybody feels out of position on this team.
So to answer your question about having the same energy that people had for Andrew Vaughn and for Gavin Sheets. I think the circumstances are just totally different because those two guys were put into those spots during the heart of a contention window when it shouldn't have happened. And I think a lot of the angst towards or about them, standing on the grass was more geared towards the Sox front office. And I've said this for a long time. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that was made during Rebuild 2.0 was the fact that they didn't go out and actually sign a true DH going into the 2021 season, forcing them to, put Andrew Vaughn, one, on the major league roster after having never seen a pitch above Winston-Salem, and two, asking him to try to play the outfield, which he had never done. And the kind of the same thing with Gavin Sheets there. They were thrust into those roles. And again, I think a lot of the consternation about them playing out there, while it was frustrating watching them out there, ultimately they were put in shitty positions. And the situation now with Brooks Baldwin here, I think we can both say Brooks Baldwin is probably more athletic than both of those guys. I mean, can we agree with that? So
100%.
And at the same time, I mean, nowhere close to the same position in terms of the team's competitive cycle. So whatever.
I'll give Brooks Baldwin this. He goes and he makes an incredible catch on that foul ball earlier on in the game, and then this one bites him. Would I trade the two? Sure. However, he makes an athletic play there. I think this one sort of ate him up with the wind. I didn't really get frustrated with the fact that that one got by, I guess is sort of where I'm at with it. Am I disappointed? Yeah. But was I angry at it? No, because I looked at it as a very hard play to make, even for probably a decent outfielder with a lot more experience than him. I think still could have wound up missing that ball. And I think we can both agree that both Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn had no chance of making that catch whatsoever. And so that sort of sets the level there, Steve. At least for me, I'm like, okay, we've seen this before. It happens. Maybe we're just numb to stuff like that at this point.
Yeah, and I wasn't over the top, throwing shit against the wall when that happened with Baldwin today. I think he summed it up pretty well. It's just that kind of sucked right there. And then, kind of just got me thinking, if there was an actual outfielder out, does that play get made? Maybe. So
I can't sit there and say definitively yes. So I think maybe is the correct answer with it. It was tough. I mean, that wind was not a joke today. Kind of annoying almost to an extent throughout the ball game. So I go back to it, that ball probably leaves the park in some different wind conditions. So, it probably could have been worse if we're taking all things considered here. But it is what it is, and that's sort of the difference in the ball game right there. You hate to lose them like that, but that's baseball. Steve, we've got to get to some off the field topics before we get out of here too, though. So I want to change gears and talk about a little report that came out. I believe Forbes had done their list every year. They do a little report on the state of every franchise in Major League Baseball. There was an interesting tidbit that came out in this one, Steven. Jerry Reinsdorf has some co-owners. Why don't you talk about that?
So in that article from Forbes, they would list the franchise valuation for all 30 teams. And if you actually went to the link for the story and you could click on each individual team and see what that franchise valuation was, and then you'd get taken to another screen that would kind of show you who the ownership group was, when they purchased the team, and at what dollar value. And the interesting thing was when you clicked on the Sox, who are 15th in the league in terms of their franchise valuation at a little bit over $2.1 billion, but you click on that link and list their owners, Jerry Reinsdorf, Matt and Justin Ishbia, and then in the years acquired, 1981, 2025. So the very story we talked about a few weeks ago regarding primarily Justin Ishbia purchasing and buying out some of the minority owners, it appears that that transaction went through. Now, what percentage, Justin Ishbia has at this point, we don't know. But at this point, it's based off of that article. It seems pretty clear that the Ishbia brothers and Jerry Reinsdorf are the primary owners of this team. So now that leads to a lot of other unanswered questions. Again, people wondering, okay, what does this mean long term?
Yeah, can we play some speculation game here?
I think what it basically means is either one of two things. Either they will be the ones in position to buy out the rest of the minority owners when the reign of terror comes to an end, or maybe similar to what is in Cleveland right now with the Dolans. Maybe there's a 5 to 7 year plan, which I know it sounds interesting hearing somebody at 88, 89 years old talking about a 5 to 7 year plan, but that could very well be the case. That just goes back to my overarching point about Justin and Matt Ishbia, that they wouldn't have pulled away from the Minnesota Twins if there wasn't some viable reason for them to do so, because there's only 30 Major League Baseball teams. They don't become available very often. So, when you have the opportunity to buy one, you usually don't back out willingly.
My only question is, why has there not been some sort of formal press conference regarding this transaction? Because we all sat here on that Friday night show on these airwaves. We planned because we knew there was a deadline for this transaction, right? And there hasn't been a lot of details around it. We don't know what's involved in it. There's been stuff that's come out. You see the posts from, what is that, Northbrook Bob, and you got everybody chiming in from everywhere about whether or not Jerry Reinsdorf actually is going to sell the team, and Jerry's not going to sell. And why is there zero transparency? Just zero fucking transparency about the whole entire thing.
Because that's the
Give us like a little bit.
Anthony, that's the Jerry Reinsdorf way of doing business. Think about this. When your boy Tony La Russa was brought back, did we know the terms of the contract? Do we ever know the terms of a contract for a White Sox manager or for a Bulls head coach?
I think it's a standard 3-year deal. Or at least that's the rumor. That's the rumor. We think it
is. We think it is. But the terms are never released. Ever. We never know the contract status of general managers with these teams. He just plays everything so close to the vest. I'm honestly not surprised that the organization.
There's a possibility they're making decisions for the organization right now, and we don't know because it's never going to get out.
Correct.
So you can't even establish. This is what pisses me off, though. You can't even establish what's happening behind the scenes. There's no accountability that way.
It kind of, in some ways, reminds me of when Rick and Kenny were here. We didn't ultimately know who was running things. You've got all these different camps out there.
If you're Justin and Matt Ishbia, wouldn't you want your name all over it? Or no, because it's that embarrassing because it's the White Sox right now. But wouldn't you want to take pride in hey, I just acquired this and send something? They seem to do business very differently than Jerry Reinsdorf. So if they're under his thumb at the moment and they're sworn to secrecy and the terms of everything that Jerry's doing, doesn't that seem like, I don't know, maybe you're right. Maybe they're just waiting it out, but if your name's listed on the ownership paperwork of this team, Dude, could you imagine owning the Chicago White Sox and being like, I'm not going to say anything about it?
Well, that's
Like, that'd be
where
the first thing I would do. If I was a billionaire, I'd be like, I fucking own this team.
that's
I'm
where
going to make
the
some changes.
details of the percentages ultimately come into play, because like if somehow Jerry still has even a tenth of a percentage more, he could literally be like, shut the fuck up. Don't say anything. I'll speak.
But he doesn't speak.
I understand that. But again, if he's got the highest percentage, he could easily, go to the board because he's the chairman and say, there's a gag order. Nobody else speaks. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it could be. We don't know.
We're playing the speculation game. I'm just saying, if you're a White Sox fan, like Justin and Matt claim to be, I'm sure they are, because
And if they're listening, because why wouldn't they be? Please let us know what's going on.
Like, send a signal, some sort of signal, right, Steve? Like, just send a signal that you're here, that you've got things, and we're working on. I want to talk about this though too, because there was some interesting comments that like came from this story in some X replies from Phoenix Suns fans who do not like the Ishbia ownership regime that's in place there. And I don't want to like go down this road again with bad ownership and all of this other stuff, Steve. I'm sure you saw some of this. I'm curious what your commentary here is on people trying to like warn White Sox fans that it's not going to be better than Jerry. Like, I don't feel like you've got room to talk.
Well,
it's just my thought.
I think, and again, I don't really follow the NBA, to be completely honest with you.
Me either. So when I see this stuff, it sort of raises alarm bells.
And so am I fully versed on like the salary cap structure and how all of that works with the luxury tax and everything? No. And from what I've gathered in, our guy Bez, was trying to explain this to us in the group text about, the trading of all of the first round picks in order to get Kevin Durant and, the quote unquote financial flexibility that kind of went by the wayside with that transaction and it ultimately not working. It seems as if that is the reason for all of the anger with Suns fans right now. But I guess here's how I look at it. And again, baseball, like the NBA and MLB, their financial structures are just so drastically different that I don't think it's fair to compare one with the other. But like, think about it like this, that Suns team a few years ago, like they were a playoff team, and then they traded for a guy that is going to go to the Hall of Fame and has been a part of championship teams before. So they were going for it. They were in a position.
Does that sound like something that White Sox fans would love?
Yeah. So give me that. Like Bez has talked about this, saying that I think the Suns want like $180 million over their luxury tax bill was $180 million or some ridiculous number. Oh my God, a team willing to, a group of owners willing to spend money on real fucking superstar talent. Oh God, how awful. It sounds so bad.
Well, we've
never tried it. Maybe we should. We'll see. We'll see if it's really as bad as people make it out to be.
This is what doesn't make sense to me. The comments that I'm not sure which brother had said it, talking about rebuilds and why would anybody want to rebuild when you can go for it every year just by spending money. And that was the NBA style. This doesn't compute to me if they've taken part ownership of the team, unless there is something that says that they're strictly financially invested right now and have no control over the operations, which has got to be a really frustrating thing for them at this point. Like, I would be frustrated with that. If that's what, like, if I was firmly in camp, screw rebuilds, I don't think I'm ponying up millions of dollars to invest in a team that's currently like perennial, like just a perennial rebuild right now.
Well, and
There's got to be
what I
some
wrote.
frustration there.
Yeah, and that's what I wrote about a couple of weeks ago when this whole rumor kind of started. And it was like, okay, if this deal goes down, what will the after effects of that be? Will the Ishbias come in here and will they go to Jerry and say, hey, we don't want to wait this thing out. We want to start bringing in some talent now. There's no money on the books here. We've got the money. We will pay for the players. Let us bring in real players now. Quit fucking around with these prospects that may not pan out with a development system that we don't know is going to be any better than what, just failed in Rebuild 2.0. Let's get some known commodities in here and try to fucking win something now. We don't know what those discussions are like behind the scenes. And unfortunately, we're not going to know. And so there are a lot of unanswered questions. And like, basically we're not really going to know anything until November, honestly, when free agency starts. And, the other compounding factor here is we're going into the last winter before a work stoppage. Because I still firmly believe that we're going to lose half of the 2027 season. My
If
position
not
on
all
that
of it.
I don't even want to think about that. I'm firmly convinced that opening day 2027 might not be till the 4th of July. But
that's an interesting wrinkle in this too.
Yeah, so we're just going to have to kind of wait and see. So it will be very interesting in some regards once the season ends and, you get 7 days after the conclusion of the World Series and free agency can technically start. And we'll see,
I don't think they're going to do anything.
Is it, well, we don't know. Like, we don't know, is it just going to be business as usual for the White Sox, or do they come out and do they, say, hey, Kyle Tucker, you want $500 million? Just,
I was told that he's getting an extension on the north side. I don't think the ink's dry on that one yet, but that'd be interesting. That would be really interesting.
It would be. It would be. So time will tell.
Time will tell. Steven, speaking of time, we're just about out of time here. We've got an off day on Monday, and then it's once again your favorite divisional rival, Minnesota Twins.
No, it's not.
It's not? Oh
no, they get Sacramento coming in. And yes, I said Sacramento.
Sacramento. I'm looking down the schedule. I was looking at a week ahead there. That's my bad. It is the Oakland, Sacramento, California, whatever town they're playing in now.
Lovely West Sacramento, let me tell you.
West Sacramento. Man, there's been some interesting ball games out in Sacramento. Did you see their injury cart run out of gas the other day?
Yeah, this whole thing's gonna be a fucking
the operations over there are interesting. And then it's on the road to Boston. So you foreshadowed that a little bit with Shane Smith there. Got any predictions for the Athletics versus the Chicago White Sox this week?
I'm gonna be optimistic. I'm gonna say they're gonna find a way to win a series again. They're gonna have a winning homestand. They're going to find a way.
That's big if true. True. I'll ride with it. We'll say it's going to be a winning homestand. That would be fantastic. Just for morale, I think we'd feel better. Take two out of 3, 2 series in a row.
It would make me feel very good.
I had to add some to the win total too. So when we get back on these airways, we could talk about how far ahead of pace we are.
Well, I'm not going to be on the airwaves for a little bit after tonight here due to some work travels coming up over the next few weeks. So,
Well, I'll be able to talk about him. You
Sure.
might not be.
Sure.
But Steven, what do we got pitching matchup wise? You got the probables here for this
Well,
Oakland
I
series?
know for the Sox where it's going to be turn 3 through the rotation. So we're going to get Sean Burke, Johnny Cannon, and Davis Martin. So I know that. Look, Sean Burke and Johnny Cannon, the big thing for them is controlling the strike zone. It got away from Sean Burke that last outing in Cleveland, especially. He's had back-to-back rough outings, after that solid start on opening day. So really looking for him to rebound, be aggressive, maintain control of the strike zone. Working ahead, staying ahead is going to be a big thing for him there. And, Johnny Cannon, that start in Cleveland on Thursday, he got more swings and misses and was actually able to generate some strikeouts with it. But again, just the hard contact and his inability to keep the ball in the ballpark has been problematic. And he's also just been walking far too many guys. I continue to look at this and just look at the data. I don't understand what Katz and Bannister are seeing from a pitch usage standpoint being so sinker and cutter reliant. It's not working. I don't know why they aren't flipping to a four-seam fastball changeup as the primary offerings here that he's using. I would love for somebody to actually ask Ethan Katz that question that is around the team to get perspective on what exactly they're seeing and why they're continuing to have him approach things the same way.
You might just have to write a couple more pitch mix articles, Steven, over at On Tap Sports.
I'm sure people love seeing my commentary about Johnny Cannon here. They didn't get enough of it over the course of the spring.
I don't think so. I think we're due for at least another 5,000 words on Johnny Cannon's pitch mix from you this year. You got to fill that quota. Steven, that's about all the time we have for today. You got any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
It was just really nice to piss in the Ginger Sox Cheerios over the weekend after people in their organization were running their mouths. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed those wins very much.
Winning's fun. Losing, not so much. But winning is fun.
Nuke LaLoosh famously said in the classic Bull Durham, which, I think is probably the best baseball movie ever made. I'll take that over that bullshit one that was made about, the Cleveland Indian franchise. Fuck that shit. So I'll take Bull Durham over it. I like winning. It's like better than losing.
There you go. That's my final thought too. Winning is better than losing. Steven, once again, always a pleasure. Thank you to everybody who tuned in to Sox on Tap. This was just, another weekend of talking about what's going on in Chicago White Sox baseball. You can follow the show at Sox on Tap. You can follow me at Tony on Tap. You can't follow Steve because he's not online. Not online. You can also find all of our work over at ontapsportsnet.com. Thank you once again for tuning in. White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.